Welcome to another episode of Data Gurus. I'm so excited to welcome Mike Nash, who is the Chief Growth Officer of KS&R. Thank you, Mike, for joining me. Thank you for being part of this conversation. I also should mention you're also on the board of the company as well. So
That is
welcome, Mike.
correct. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it. I've seen a few of your more recent ones and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So, I'd love to ask guests a little bit about their background
Sure.
into how they got to this point in the journey. Briefly, I think people, it's always interesting because I think young people always have this plan of where their future looks like. And
Yeah.
the reality is you weave and dip and dive and you eventually, still figure out what you're going to do anyway.
Yeah.
So Mike,
No.
tell us a little bit about your journey.
I think that weave and dip and dive is particularly true in this industry, right? In the market
Yeah.
research industry. I am on the advisory council at the University of Texas at Arlington program. And some of
Love it.
those folks went into that master's program saying, hey, I want to do research. But it's a small number of people that sort of
Yeah.
grow up wanting to be a market research analyst or in this space, right? So I went to a small liberal arts college here outside of Syracuse, upstate New York. Got an economics degree, so certainly was in the data world, for lack of a better word. Went to Albany State for a master's, thinking I was going to do civil service, be in politics, that kind of thing. And I got my master's in public administration. So again, not
Nice.
research heavy, but there was some
Yeah.
research elements. And then the only thing that chased me out of that world was I was on 2 or 3 mayoral campaigns, and my guys lost every time. So I was like,
Oh
wait a minute,
man.
if I can't pick a winner, this might not be a good career for me, right? So and
Yeah,
you get close to the family candidates and then they lose. It's like, oh, I can't go through this.
it's hard.
So I bailed and answered a tiny little want ad in a newspaper, which was again 30 years ago. That's how you found the job, right? And
Yeah.
unbranded, and walked in and met 4 or 5 of the owners and said, this sounds interesting. Let's give it a shot. And that was
Right.
30 plus years ago.
Wow. And just for reference, what was your first job when you joined the company?
In the company, I was a the research assistant, right? Just starting out ground level, just sort of looking up data. I think we were
Nice.
sharing a computer at the time, right? This was like
Yeah.
93 or something,
Yeah.
right? 94.
Yeah.
So everyone didn't even have their own computer. Did a lot of time copying big giant binders, right?
Yeah.
Photo binders and running. We weren't doing the punch card stuff. We were past that. But
Yeah.
but it was old school. Yeah, it was
Kind of lived
interesting.
and died by the FedEx deadline.
A lot of FedEx. We knew every FedEx spot and where he went in what order. So if you missed him here, we could go down
Go
to
over there.
5th
Yeah.
Street and catch him down there. And then we always had to make the run to the airport. There was always an airport FedEx. That was the last pickup.
Yeah.
And we'd be hustling to the airport to meet a driver before they got on the plane. Yeah.
So cool. Obviously you've been with the company for so long. What do you love about, I'll say, research first and foremost? Like what gets you excited about it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that one kept me in Syracuse, right? I was always off to the big city or wanting to go do something else, but I found that I could still play with major brands, right? When you look at the people we support, they are the big hitters of the Fortune 500 for the most part. So that's exciting to me, and I could still do it in the comfort of Syracuse. Again,
Yeah.
pre-COVID, that was not a common thing, right? We had to go to New York or had to go to Boston or go to DC to sort of be in the heart of things. But here with KS&R, I could still work with companies out of those areas and support them. And, except for our healthcare group, that probably does save some lives in some ways with the research they do.
Yeah.
We're not saving lives, but we are solving meaningful problems, right? These tend to be things that are moving markets, particularly the places I play with my business services clients and in our technology space. You can't have many conversations in the office or outside the office without talking about AI or talking about synthetic data or talking about cloud. And we're on the forefront of all that stuff, right? One of my first projects way back in the 90s was starting to understand, would people even pay for the internet? What was this thing? It wasn't even called the internet, right? What would we do with that? So I think being on the leading edge of some of those more macro shifting, macro moving kind of ideas is exciting to me.
Yeah. And watching and helping your clients traverse those trends and try to figure out where they're going.
And be able to do it and not have to live in Silicon Valley to do it, right?
Go.
That's the beauty of it, that we can still live in Syracuse and enjoy all the things that Syracuse brings from a smaller lifestyle or a smaller community than being in the major metro area.
Yeah, that's cool. So talk to me a little bit about, your perspective on AI, and I know you're really passionate about thought leadership. So in some ways they're a little bit I shouldn't say contradicting, but their thought leadership is really deep critical thinking from my perspective.
Yeah.
And AI can do that, but not necessarily using your full brain to do
Right.
it, but using
Right.
a machine. Um, Give me a perspective. Actually, let me start from the basics. Give me a definition of thought leadership from your perspective.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're right. There is a paradox there with,
Yeah.
with AI and thought leadership, right? And I think they do meld together at some point. Sometimes maybe they meld too easily for some people than others,
Yeah.
but really when we think about thought leadership, and one of the reasons why we're positioning it in some ways as defense from AI is that
Yeah.
it's really about original insight, right? And
Right.
so for us, it's not just scraping the web, or it's not just scanning the last 10 articles written by company X and trying to improve it. It's really coming up with something original. And the other part that's a real kicker for us on thought leadership is that it changes how people see the problem. It's not just the answer to a problem, but it
Yeah.
changes the framework or the paradigm that they're looking at with that problem. And then the third part that really does matter, and again, we even still fall short from this sometimes, and our clients do as well, is that what do they do next with it, right? How do you activate on that, or how do you take a step because of that, right? And I think all
Yeah.
three of those pieces need to be clear and successful to have a successful piece of thought leadership. And all three of them don't always come together at the same time or
Yeah.
easily, right? So the original insight though is the one where it gets you out of the AI space, right? You can use AI to sort of see what's out there. You can get a sense of where the white space might be. But you can't just write, in our opinion, you can't just write quality thought leadership using AI tools. It just, by definition, they're not original, right? They're not
Yeah.
provocative. They're not putting a new perspective on something. They are just kind of regurgitating what's already out there, and often kind of simplifying it to the mean, right? If you're thinking about a numeric, which not all thought leadership has to be numeric, but if you're thinking about a numeric, the role of AI is to kind of bring you to consensus or bring you to that median point. And that's not usually what makes quality thought leadership.
So let's peel it back a little bit. First of all, is the trend of thought leadership, has that changed? Has it increased, decreased? Like, what are you seeing? What's happening right now
Yeah.
in terms of thought leadership as companies are investing in it?
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be great to know.
We're certainly seeing an uptick in the sense that, again, it is one of those last stanchions of original thought, right? So
Okay.
again, no matter what your marketing budget is, no matter how many TV spots you could try to grab, if everyone's kind of recycling the same ideas,
Yeah.
it gets hard to stand out, right? So we see thought leadership, particularly on the B2B side, not exclusively, but that's where I spend a lot of my personal space, is more on the
Right.
B2B kind of technology side. Thought leadership becomes one of the last places where you can really differentiate in a unique way. And we are seeing, I'd encourage everyone to look at the Global Thought Leadership Institute. They put together a nice program over the last couple of years, really putting together a group that really thinks deeply about this as an industry space. And they are putting forward a lot of good data, a lot of good examples of what is quality versus not quality.
Yeah.
To ferret out some of those kind of weaker, the AI slop dreaded term. But I think the Global Thought Leadership Institute is really doing a nice job putting some guardrails on this sub industry, if you will, to really make sure it's legitimate. And I would encourage everyone to take a look at what they're putting out and some of the data they're delivering. But we know for a fact that executives are looking at thought leadership. We know for a fact that they're admitting that at a very high level, up over 90%, that they're admitting that thought leadership helps influence their purchases, again, in
Okay.
this B2B, primarily
Yeah.
technology space, but not exclusively. And the paradox is also that we know that they admit that there's only about 15% of that thought leadership that they're deeming as very good or excellent, right? So
Yeah.
there is a gap between how much they're leaning or want to lean on thought leadership activity versus what's really breaking through and helping them in a positive way. So we think that 90+% that are using it and only 15% indicating that it's quality, there's a big gap there to play that KS&R is trying to take advantage of and offer some greater quality for firms that want to close that gap a little bit and be more meaningful. And again, we see that as a way to use AI to help us do this work, but also defend against, you just can't use AI from start to finish and pretend that it's going to be quality.
And who typically at these companies is making decisions about, hey, I need to develop original content, thought leadership. Are you working with the C-suite? It feels different than the traditional consumer insights group that a lot of agencies work with.
Yeah, no, it's a mix, but you are starting to see titles with thought leadership in them, right? Which again,
Ah,
it is new, and that's a change in the last 5 years, right? And
yeah,
you're seeing them in companies that you wouldn't naturally think of. Again, the bulk of our thought leadership work is done for various consulting firms,
right.
the big tech manufacturers, software producers. That's kind of expected. They've always been out there doing that kind of thing. But now you'll see thought leadership departments or individuals
Mm,
popping up in construction firms, major manufacturing firms, right? So I think it's definitely spreading as
mm,
people start to see that this is a place where we can differentiate and be a
yeah,
little bit different. And I think that's sort of the beauty of this wave that we're riding right now around thought leadership. And I think hopefully that'll continue for a while. But we're definitely seeing this as a trending towards a high water mark in activity that maybe 5-10 years ago it wasn't talked about as much and thought about in the same way, because firms had other ways to get their word out. Right now it's becoming more and more difficult to sort
to
of
get the
show what
message
you're all
out.
about without doing thought leadership.
Yeah. And also, I think there's this fine balance, and you tell me about being self-serving versus really helping an industry or a segment of clients or customers to say, irrespective if ultimately if you buy from me or not, here's a
Yeah.
objective piece of thought leadership that could help you drive business.
Yeah, again, I would say that was harder to communicate to our clients a few years ago. Again,
Yeah.
if it's coming out of the marketing department, we get a lot of people that want a sales brochure. They don't know
Right.
it, right? They say they want thought leadership, but they end up describing some sort of salesy kind of thing.
Right.
And you're right, there's nothing more that will kill somebody, the desire to read an article,
Yeah.
if you're overwhelming them with sales brochures and click here for our product description. It really does need to be more about the issue at hand, the challenge at hand. And then by default, they start to think of you as the deliverer of that solution, right? So
Yeah.
I think that the sell is kind of the soft secondary result. You really are trying to help solve a problem or think about a problem differently. Remember, not
Yeah.
not every thought leadership piece has to solve a problem per se, but you're trying to highlight some issues to be aware of, that these executives can make better decisions and
Yeah.
and be smarter about it and use that dynamic wisdom in a powerful way for their own business.
Yeah. And you mentioned like the three pillars in terms of successful thought leadership. Obviously, activation is a big component. And do you guys play in that space
Yeah.
or yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're doing more and more of that. We certainly have a design element within KS&R.
Okay.
And this is a space that, again, a lot of times the ad firms that we're working with will do some of this work, but we're certainly taking more and more of it. But the big thing for us, and again, this is shifting over the last couple years, is that traditionally we would go out, do a big study, come back, and either we'd write something, the client would write something, somewhere in between, and you'd have this massive, whatever, 20, 30, 50
Yeah.
page white paper, right? That was the
Right.
phrase that was always used. I want to do a white paper. And that's still fine, right? That we still do a lot of that work. Our communication to our clients is to think about it more as a compounding asset, that it
Yeah.
should not be just a white paper and done, right? It
Right.
should be used in multiple areas, from all your different social media channels to obviously the big, horizon piece, if you
Sure.
will, or the big landmark piece that you want to put out there. But then how do you distribute that within your own sales force, within
Mm,
your own company, and then within your prospects and targets?
mhm.
So I think we look at more of a bit of a holistic campaign kind of notion to sort of say, how do we reuse these insights beyond the big white paper, right? Because that's certainly still a leading element, but it shouldn't be the only element. And I think we do everything from workshops. We do, we started doing Lego creative play, right? Where we bring
I
in the executives and start
yeah.
having them sort of move Lego blocks around in ways to think about systematically thinking of how they might change their business based on this data and insight. So there's a lot of different
Yeah.
qualitative, creative ways to sort of actionize this data. And then I think it's got to get people out of the head of just doing a white paper and moving on to the next thing. So even if you just keep it in a narrative place, you can still chunk things up in a way and sort of keep that conversation going for months and months or even years, and not just kind of run to the next topic. But that's the biggest thing we see with our clients is that we get the work done, we have the paper gets published, and they're on to the next thing. And we're trying to counsel more and more of them to keep reusing that data and think about creative new ways of using that data that will again compound your investment in a more positive way.
So it's a long tail, like use the data. It can be used over a longer time period.
Yeah, it's really a systemic approach as opposed to a one and done kind of approach, right? So it's really kind of how do you activate this in different environments and different touch points with different users, both internal to your company and customers and prospects externally or partner channels even, right? To keep that dialogue moving.
Yeah. I find that people have really low attention to, like, to your point, like you could do the white paper and then you could chunk it up and use it over a period of time. But I don't know if you deal with this in terms of trying to create memory for the client, but also obviously even potential prospects or customers. Is that something that's different now than it was a few years ago? And how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of that comes down to the framing and the delivery of the piece, right? Whether it be a three panel carousel on a social media feed to a 50-page, very academic, 10 pages of footnotes kind of white paper, right? Anywhere in between. So I think a lot of that has to do with the narrative that you're writing, the style that you're using. And not to forget the graphic elements, right? Again, sometimes we do that with our clients. Sometimes they have their own internal agencies that are doing that, but there is a lot to the art of making things memorable and making things intriguing to read. Even if you have a great topic, I think the standard, 10 pages of bar charts, people start to lose their mind by the end of that, right? So you really got to think about how do you want to use this data? How can you make the data a bit interactive, right? We've got a lot of clients that on their website now, you can sort and filter that white paper to your specific industry or part of the world or size of company. We're doing a lot of almost kind of like quick polls, right? What do you look like, right? What is your kind of characteristics? And that serves up a certain part of the study for them that maybe they don't have to read the whole 50 pages. It'll take them to the 5 pages that they are likely to care most about based on some predictive model that we can build for them. Doing a lot of indices, right? Where we're sort of combining elements to sort of create almost like a consumer price index, right? Let's check the security index for Q2, and let's see what happens to that security index 6 months from now or 12 months from now, right? So I think the indice world is also one where there's more to be done to create something that's a little bit ongoing and gives people a bit of a summary of the data that, again, they're not forced to read that 50-page diatribe, although it still needs to exist to show the validity, right? That just wasn't just made up through AI or just quick and dirty, right? So I think there is home for the more thorough, rigorous white paper, but then it's how do you distinguish that from some other sort of ways to deliver the same message in a more user-friendly environment.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's being able to create deliverables or engagement based on target audience, whoever's going to engage with the content that's being developed. I actually, in this day and age, I love meaty content. Like it's to pour through data and to really understand connections. And even to your point about defining the problem differently, like that doesn't happen overnight.
No.
Talk to me a little bit about a client comes to you and says, hey, I want to develop thought leadership, and they might have an exact prescription of what they want to do. And you're like, wait a second, let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish. How long is that problem definition take?
So that is a critical element. And again, we talk about AI all the time, right? It wasn't long when I was pulling my own hair. I was saying, how much more could we say about AI that's new or different or fun, right? So now that world shifted to synthetic a little bit, right? So we're off the hook. Now we're writing a lot about synthetic and not as much about AI. But even in the AI world, we spend a lot of time up front with the client pushing workshops or at least literature reviews where, again, you can use AI to scour the, every piece ever written about CAD CAM design or something, right? And just see what's out there. That helps you find that tension of what could be new or differentiated or unique. And I think that the tension word's a big one. You hear about that a lot in writers' schools or authors or, people writing scripts for plays or shows. Same idea here. You need something that has some tension in it to really grab the reader. And I think that's where we spend as much time as we can up front with our client in workshops or in different conversations to try to figure out what is that tension. Because again, the client has a point of view that they're trying to get out there because they're trying to sell something or make their point, and that's fine. But that's not your lead, or that's not going to be your hook, right? So you got to find out, how does that tie in to something that we can make a bit of an argument or a case for, right? If you think about even a trial lawyer world, right? You're trying to build a case for something. And that's where we do some workshops and some interviews with the client or with customers even. We do a literature search, try to figure out what's out there in the world already that we can, again, make sure we don't replicate by mistake and sort of just say something that, company X said 2 years ago. And more importantly, how do we build on that argument or build on that debate, if there is such a thing in the space? And again, in places that I spend more of my time, things like AI and cybersecurity and technology development, there often is a debate, right? Is this really good for me, right? Do I need to do this? And so we can find places where we can have that tension to feed off, and you almost don't care what the answer is, which side of the argument that the answer is going to fall on, but you need something in there that's going to give people a little bit of a hook and a reason to read the piece.
Very cool. And I'm fascinated by everything you just said, and I'm conscious of the fact that traditional market research skills aren't necessarily held in that way. It almost feels a little bit like management consulting skills or business skill. So how did you evolve your team in that way to be able to do that's a hard pivot?
We're still evolving, right? We are
true.
still evolving. I think you're right. This is going up the ladder to more of a consultative role. I think the power that we lean on as researchers and sort of trained as researchers, that we are sitting on the data that is the answer, right? So again, as opposed to, if I was going to take a negative view to management consultants, right? It's not my opinion on this frictional issue, right? Whatever the issue is, I'm serving up, here's what 1,000 CIOs said about this issue. You can not believe them if you want to, but it's not my idea. So you take the personal out of it a bit, and we lean on that data. So we're still leaning on the research element as the biggest asset to make our case. But then, yes, you do need to bring in a bit of a creative writer kind of element, which again is hard to find. We sometimes use stringers, we sometimes write some of our own, but there are people out there that have more of that skill set than maybe you would find in your traditional market research house. And then again, on the activation side, like I said, we are building our own group internally and sort of doing more and more of that creative activation to compound that asset in a more positive way going forward. But you're right, it's not easy. It's not the first knee-jerk reaction that someone coming out of a market research degree program has. But I think as they see the results and you see what you're trying to solve for, people coming along.
Yeah, cool. Let's switch topics. We kind of talked about this briefly, AI, but I know you guys have launched a new initiative as it relates to synthetic data.
Yeah, Echo is our synthetic data play. We've started with what we call Amplify, which is where we think about, from our overall AI philosophy, the human needs to be in the loop, right? We and you've heard that phrase from other people, but that is a big part of our world. We never use any AI tools unaccompanied without the human vibe. So I think that's critical for how we look at AI. It's a support, it's an assist, it's not the answer.
It's not the primary.
And then building off of that, going more specific to the latest craze in synthetic, where everyone's sort of being pushed to do traditional research, cheaper and faster. We still don't hear a lot of better, right? We hear a lot of good enough, right? If I heard one more client tell me it's good enough, I might lose my mind. But we're trying to make the case that it might not be good enough. And our Echo product is a way to look at governance, look at transparency, and look at quality of that synthetic model that you might want to use, right? So we have built a tool and we've launched that, and there'll be another a webinar in the middle of June that you'll see from KS&R sort of explaining and talking a little bit more about KS&R's Echo, which is meant to be the governance source to sort of put some guardrails on kind of what is and is not quality synthetic data.
Got it. Sorry, I just would be explicit. Governance source, what does that mean specifically? It's you're the arbiter of
We would like, yes, we're looking to be the arbiter of the quality of that data set, right? So, you know, send us what you're using. We can look at that and try to point out where we think the synthetic is creeping in. Short answer, if we can point to the synthetic data, that's probably not great data, right? If you can tell the difference that easily between the two. So we have a lot of work to do there as an industry, even just defining digital twins versus synthetic versus AI, right? Those terms all start to get jumbled up by executives just wanting to go faster and cheaper. And we're trying to create something that some of these market research folks can push back with and say, wait a minute, that's not really going to give us a great answer. And that's where we think there's a lack in the market, that everyone's rushing to build these models that may or may not be correct. And we have some tools that can help them make better choices on which of these models to use.
Cool. Are you seeing from clients that there's a mandate to somehow say use synthetic or AI?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
and again, it comes at the price of cheaper and quicker, right? And again, we're not hearing the give me a better answer.
Quality.
And that's a bit disappointing. So we are trying to still fight for, there are good places to use synthetic, and there are good synthetic models, and there are not so good. And I think you just want to be kind of eyes wide open as to which you're using and what you're using it for, right? There's a lot of it too, right? There's some things that good enough probably is good enough, right? And that's okay. We just want to make sure people are making those decisions consciously with intent, right? I think intentionality is a big part of this whole AI space and subsequently the synthetic space. Not just to do it, but to do it intentionally in the right places.
Yeah, there's two things that I still question is, you know, everybody wants speed, quality, and price, lower price. And I think we have to be realistic of what is feasible out of those three. Probably two out of the three is maybe I don't want to sound like a cynic, but the two out of the three are probably going to get you where you want to go. But to say I can get all three is really difficult unless you say quality is good enough, which is a different motto, right?
Yeah, and I think there's something to that three-legged stool. And I get disappointed when I'm not even sure, not so much our clients, but our clients' bosses are not even considering the quality answer, right? They're considering exclusively the speed and cost answer. And so I think we're just trying to be a reminder that there is a quality lever to consider. And again, if some cases you don't need that, then that's fine, but don't just dismiss it out of hand without thinking about what that might cost you. Because I think we're going to start to see, and maybe we already have seen in some of the AI world, it only takes one or two bad decisions to lose that ROI that you thought you gained by doing something faster and quicker, right? I mean, maybe even only one decision could sort of wreck that math. So I think companies have to be cognizant of that and just be, again, intentional about where they place these tools. And I think our Echo product can help them make better decisions on which synthetic models to lean towards and to think about.
That's awesome. Well, I think it's great. And I also think as an industry, it's great to develop these tools that allow clients, agencies, whomever to understand, you know, exactly where does the data land in terms of synthetic or non-synthetic. I did hear that a lot of the synthetic data or digital twin data, like the open-end responses, are so clean. And it's a bifurcation, because I know traditional research with human respondents, they don't like when ChatGPT is used in open ends, but yet digital twins have these pristine, clean open ends, and we got to really figure all that out. Because
it's a problem. It's even that's one of our sanity checks or data quality checks. That's one thing we didn't talk a lot about in the thought leadership world, is that we spend a lot of time still both with AI tools and with just old fashioned hand scouring data to make sure it's quality, right? So we're still at a point where we're throwing back 20, 30, 35% of completes as being illegitimate, either intentionally from fraud or just somebody falling asleep at the wheel and not paying attention. But yeah, when you start asking questions like, I don't know, how big is the Empire State Building? And you're getting exact answers, you're like, wait a minute, this person doesn't know that, right? This is in jeopardy, right? So that's one way to spot out, these AI induced chatbots or something that's not quite a human activity. And you can get too good an answer, and that doesn't do you any better either, right? So I think there's a middle ground to find that we're looking for authentic, real answers. Again, especially in the thought leadership world, we want people to understand or tell us what is going on with this particular problem.
Right.
And that's sort of the challenge.
Yeah. And I think my second point is that we just don't know the cost yet, because we don't know how much we need to hydrate the models with real data.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's TBD.
Yeah, you start getting into the first time use, and then all of a sudden 2 or 3 years or even 2 or 3 months later, you get this drift kind of notion, right? That's the buzzword you're going to start hearing more about, this model drift. And then do you have to recalculate the entire model, and is it still any good? And there's a lot that we still don't know. We're all for the experimentation and sort of kicking the tires on all these things. You just hope people are doing it with sort of the best intentions behind them and not just trying to go fast.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, Mike, it's always been a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I feel like we have so many other topics we've talked about, but I appreciate you joining the show and sharing your perspective. Thank you.
It's been great. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you do for the industry and keep pumping these things out here. I did listen to your professor from a few weeks ago, right? So whatever's going down at Columbia is interesting, because I follow one of the golf writers there. Mark Brody's a professor there. Did the whole golf shot stuff. And that's a fascinating statistical view if you're a real stat nerd. And the last guy you had on about some of this AI stuff was interesting too. So I think, or synthetic stuff. So I think there's good conversations happening, and we certainly want to be a part of those and then drive those where it makes sense. And thank you for putting our voice out there.
Of course, I appreciate it. And I also like having academia be part of the conversation, because there's no real commercial intent. It's just, what does the data actually say? Gives us a little bit of a balancing effect in terms of...
they've gotten a bad rap in the past. Now they're starting to come back a little bit as being relevant to the party again. So that's good to see. Correct.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day. Appreciate it.
You too. Take care.
Bye.